Hello, I'm Alice Newland, the president of the League of Women Voters of Manatee County. This presentation will cover the 6 Florida constitutional amendments and 1 Manatee Land Referendum. First, let's say a few words about the League of Women Voters and what services we offer. The League was established in 1920, 6 months before the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. Men were accepted in 1974. We research, and then we educate and advocate. When we educate, this presentation is an educational presentation, so we are not going to be advocating for any position. So you might want to get a pencil and paper and take notes on the pros and cons or how you want to vote on any individual amendment after hearing the pros and cons. We serve the voters and promote good governance. We're nonpartisan, nonprofit political organizations, so we don't support any party or any candidate. Our website in Manatee League, lwvmanatee.org, has a lot of good voting information on it. So if you follow the blue arrow, you can see, you click on voters information, and then click on election information. You'll get this page. You can see that the top category here is 2020 General Election Voters Guides. That will have, it has the amendment guide. It will have all the guides in it. And you notice the bottom item there is a link to videos. We are running many candidate forums, and any nonpartisan organization that has a candidate forum, we put a link there to this forum so you can see and hear the candidates yourself. We also have a second way to get voters information, the same voters information supplied by the candidates, and that's vote411.org, which is a national League of Women's site. So if you follow that gold arrow, if you press find on what's my ballot, put in your address, it will give you exactly what's on your ballot and the candidate information side by side. So you can look at it on vote411.org. Additionally, we have printed guides for both the candidates and a printed guide for the amendments, which will be delivered to libraries, government buildings, and also many senior communities. Florida's Constitution is different than the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution keeps their numbers. So the 19th Amendment is always the 19th Amendment. The Florida Constitution incorporates the wording into the Constitution. So for instance, this year, Amendment 3 is about open primaries. Last election, Amendment 3 was restoring the voting rights of ex-felons. Florida's Constitution establishes rules and basic rights, and 60% is required to pass any of the constitutional amendments that you will see here today and the referendum. So let's get started. Amendment 1 changes one word, changes the word every to only. So every citizen of the United States that's a Florida resident has the right to vote. This would be only. There's no financial or functional impact. Only citizens of the United States can vote. Arizona and North Dakota recently passed a similar initiative, similar change. Supporters say that it will ensure that elections are preserved to committed citizens of the United States, that non-citizens are prevented from voting now and in the future. Critics say there's very few instances of non-citizens purposely on the voters' roll or voting. In 2012, the Secretary of State polled 180,000 names. Of those 180,000 names, they found 85 on the list that were not eligible to vote, and they don't say why they were not eligible to vote. Very small percentage. A vote yes would replace the word every with only, and a vote no would keep the language the same. Supporting organizations are the Florida Citizen Voters, which is the sponsor. It's headed by a former Missouri lawmaker, and opposing is the League of Women Voters. Amendment 2, raising Florida's minimum wage. Currently, the minimum wage is $8.56 an hour. That annually amounts to $17,800 per year. This is less in today's dollars than what a worker was making, a minimum wage worker was working 50 years ago. And there's been a considerable increase in economic growth since that time. This would raise the minimum wage to $10 an hour on September 30th, 2021. Then starting every year thereafter, 2022, 2023, it would raise the minimum wage $1 till on September 30th, 2026, the minimum wage would be $15 an hour. After that, the increases would be tied to the cost of living. Currently, some large companies such as McDonald's, Target, Amazon, Walt Disney, Costco already pay their workers $15. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, minimum wage workers tend to be 25 years or under, female, and people of color. The estimates on the cost of this for Florida government that's state and local, is $16 million the first year of implementation, and then by 2027 it would be $540 million. Opponents say that increasing the minimum wage would lead to general consumer price hikes, and it would result in job losses and reducing hours of the employees, partly because smaller business would not be able to afford the pay increases, might be forced to close. Supporters say studies show that increased minimum wage has little or no detrimental effect on job growth. They also say that the current minimum wage of $8.56 an hour is not enough money for a person to live on and should be raised over time. They also say that this would decrease employee turnover, and studies support that. The current tipped minimum wage is $5.54 an hour, but it is set at $3.02 less than the minimum wage. So as the minimum wage goes up, the tipped wage will go up, reduced by $3.02. A vote yes would incrementally raise the minimum wage. So by 2026, it's $15 an hour. It would bring many minimum wage workers above the poverty line. It would also reduce race and gender inequity. It would potentially increase economic activity as there would be increased household spending with more income. It would require small and large businesses to budget for the increased payroll taxes. It would have little detrimental effect on job growth due to the increased demands for goods and services by the higher wage paid to the workers. A vote no would allow businesses to keep their labor costs at the current level and avoid potential impact on prices to consumers, and maintain low-paying positions for teenager and young adults entering the labor market. and it's likely to continue the current wage structure that leads to poverty among young adults, women, and minorities. Supporting organizations are the AFL-CIO, Florida's for a Fair Wage, Organize Florida, League of Women Voters of Florida. Opposing are Florida Chamber of Commerce, Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association. Amendment 3. All voters vote in primary elections for legislature, governor, and cabinet. This creates a single primary, nonpartisan primary that replaces our closed primary system that we currently have for state legislature, governor, and cabinet. When the two top vote getters then proceed on to the general election, and this is effective January 1st, 2024. So it would create, in an election, all the candidates would go on one ballot, and all voters, regardless of their party affiliation, or even if they have no party affiliation, can vote on this. Florida is one of only 9 states that currently have a totally closed primary system. If this only applies to the state legislature, the governor's position, and the elected Florida cabinet positions, that's Attorney General, Chief Financial Officer, and Commissioner of Agriculture. All the other ones are appointed. The reason for that is that all these amendments have to be a single topic. So they chose the state legislature as the most important one for this amendment. The amendment wording does not require that the party of the candidate be on the ballot, and this could lead to voter confusion. However, this requires enabling legislation by our legislature, and they are almost certainly add that requirement to the enabling legislation. If there are 2 candidates of the same party running, then that election moves from the primary to the general election as more people vote in the general election than do. So there would be more people giving their preference for that candidate. The top 2 primary is sometimes called a jungle primary or blanket primary. Currently, 3.8 million voters out of 13.9 million voters in Florida cannot vote in the primary because they are not affiliated with Republican or Democratic Party. So they're either a non-party affiliated or they're a minor party. So these are primarily young voters. They're millennials or younger that are electing to go to no party affiliation. And this is only going to increase. So we currently have 27% of Florida voters that cannot vote in the primary, and that percentage will go up. The trend is clear. Florida's, there are 2 other states that use exactly this system, Washington and California, which do seem happy with their system. There are 2 others, Louisiana and Nebraska, which use a form of top 2. The financial impact of this is difficult to estimate. Supporters say that closed parties lead to hyper-partisanship, that open primaries would provide the broadest slate of candidates and more diverse candidates. They say it would attract more moderate candidates, and it would likely increase voter participation, both because of the voters that now will be able to vote and also because of the broader slate of candidates. It would discourage candidates from catering to their base. so that they would have to appeal to all voters in the primary, not just to their base. Opponents say that the amendment would undo a system set up to prevent political corruption and closed-door deal-making. They say the top two open primaries would make it harder for non-white candidates and minor party candidates to win legislative races. And they said with the current makeup of legislative districts, the passage would more likely lead to suppression of minority candidates and less attention paid to minorities by by the party that is dominated by minorities. A vote yes would establish the top two amendment system and help increase voter participation by allowing the 3.8 million voters who are not registered with a party or with a minor party to vote in the primary elections for the state legislature, the cabinet, and the governor. It could potentially lead to fewer minority candidates being elected to serve and represent their constituents. It could potentially lead to two candidates of the same party being in the general election. It would potentially produce more competitive races and attract more moderate candidates to run for state offices. It would require third-party candidates, such as the Green Party, or to compete at the primary level to secure a spot in the general election. Now they would go straight to the general election. And it would no longer enable an election to be closed by virtue of a write-in candidate. So currently, if there's only candidates of one party in a primary, everyone should be able to vote on it, but a non-qualified write-in candidate almost certainly applies, sends in an application and closes it. A vote no would continue our current system. And if unaffiliated voters wanted to vote, they would have to choose to be Republican or Democrat. And it ensures that the candidates that do proceed to the general election more closely reflect the beliefs of their party. And it would continue to close the elections with a non-qualified write-in candidate. Supporting organizations are All Voters Vote, the sponsor, and Florida Fair and Open Primaries. Opposing organizations are the AFL-CIO, the Democratic Party of Florida, the Florida State Conference NAACP, the Florida Conservation Voters, the Florida Chamber of Commerce, the Green Party, the League of Women Voters of Florida, Organized Florida Republican Party, People Over Profits, and the Florida People's Advocacy Center. Amendment 4, voter approval of constitutional amendments. This is going to require that a constitutional amendment such as this has to pass twice to become law. So in two general elections. So currently, all our constitutional amendments have to pass by 60%. And that was increased from 51% in 1996. 2006. 2006, the percentage was increased from 51% to 60%. This will greatly increase the difficulty of voters to get an amendment passed. So it's a twice passed amendment. You can see that you pass once, you've got a constitutional amendment. Now it has to be placed on a ballot again at the next general election. The supporters say, Jason Zimmerman, of the attorney for the sponsor of this amendment, says, by doing it twice, we think it will reduce the amount of whimsical amendments. Opponents say that it's adding another huge burden to an already expensive and difficult process. This process has been not only changed in 2006 to 51 to 60%, but last year our legislature changed it from a very difficult process of getting 10% of the voters who voted in the last general election in 1/8 of the congressional districts to sign a petition to get this on the ballot. Now it's been changed to 25% of all the counties. It's already made it very, very difficult. All these amendments that are citizens' initiatives were put on the ballot with great difficulty using the prior rules. This would add one more barrier where big money, corporate funded interests have a second chance to defeat a popular amendment. It's already passed, so they'll have another chance to go at it. A vote yes would reduce the number of future amendments that could be added. It will delay enactment of the amendment. It will add considerable time and money for citizens' initiative to initially pass. It will allow well-funded corporate interests a second chance to defeat popular amendments. And it will significantly limit the ability of citizens to get popular amendments passed that our legislature refuses to take up. A vote no will retain the current system of 60% voter approval in a single election. Supporting is the sponsor and the Florida Chamber of Commerce. Opposing is the ACLU, the AFCO, Common Cause, League of Women Voters of Florida, Organized Florida, Southern Poverty Law Center, Florida Immigrant Coalition, Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, and New Florida Majority, Service Employees International Union. Amendment 5, limitation on homestead exemption. The Save Our Homes benefit was enacted in 1992 and became law in 1995, where it limited the annual assessment increases on homesteaded properties to 3% a year. This benefit will transfer to a new home. When you sell your home, it'll transfer to a new home if you do it within 2 years. But the 2 years is connected to a calendar year. So a late in the year sale, let's say you sold it on December 28th, then you only have, that counts for that year. So you really only have a year and a few days to get your new home to transfer that benefit. This increases it from 2 to 3 years. So it would reduce tax revenues available for services. It also preempts local home rule. Property taxes are leveled by local governments. So the government is moving in to manage that. It makes it a little more difficult for them to budget. But a vote yes would help owners that sell their home late in the year by allowing them an additional year to purchase a new home. It will reduce property taxes. It will limit the ability of the local entities to control their budgets. But this will add tax law to the Constitution, which is difficult to change. So it makes it extremely hard to respond promptly to changes in economic positions. And it was brought in by the legislature, put in for vote, and it is felt that tax law should be law that's enacted by the government, not put in the Constitution. So a vote no would retain the current system and the current financing and the current flexibility. that we have right now. The supporting organization is the sponsor, the legislature, and opposing is the League of Women Voters of Florida. Amendment 6 is basically the same reasoning, and it is also put in by the Florida legislature. Currently, there are discounts. There's been 3 of them enacted that reduce the property tax of veterans or veterans that have been injured in combat. This would take that benefit, the tax discount, and pass it on to the spouse of a deceased veteran. So, and that benefit would finish if the spouse remarries or sells or disposes of the property. The same reasoning is true on this amendment, is that if you vote yes, it's going to reduce home rule, the ability of locals to manage their own taxation. There have been significant reductions in the property taxes for veterans. There's been 3 of them enacted. And this limits the ability of the government to react to emergency conditions. And it's felt that tax law belongs as tax law, not as constitutional amendments. A vote no would keep the homestead property tax discount to the veterans alone, not passing it on to the spouses. So the supporting organizations are the Florida legislature, the originator, and the opposing is the League of Women Voters of Florida. Now we come to the Manatee County Water Quality Protection, Fish and Wildlife Habitat Preservation and Park ad valorem tax and bonds. So Manatee County is experiencing enormous and has experienced enormous growth. So a lot of open land is being purchased and developed into subdivisions, commercial properties. Manatee County has 13% of its land that's currently set aside for these purposes. The average in Florida is 30%. So we need, this initiative would enable the county to purchase, when available, properties that are important for protecting drinking water, for protecting water quality from pollution, runoff, and also the fish and wildlife habitat, to acquire it for that, and to provide storage for flooding, as well as conserving natural areas for parks and preserves. The good examples would be Robinson Preserve or the Braden River Preserve, of how this money could be used. And there's been some excellent properties that have been lost to development because the county did not have funding to purchase it. The cost would be a maximum of $29 a year for the average homeowner. So this so a vote yes on this would make available funding to purchase environmentally sensitive land and maintain it. The bonds could be acquired that would be paid out of this tax. It would help protect manatee's water quality, fish and wildlife. It would increase the parks and preserves for recreation and for future generations, because once it's lost, it's gone forever. Vote no would keep the funding the same. Supporting organizations are the Manatee Fish and Game Association, the Trust for Public Land, Conservation Foundation of the Gulf Coast, Manatee County Audubon Society, Suncoast Waterkeeper, Brilliant Harvest, Manatee Clean Energy Alliance, League of Women Voters of Manatee County. We don't know of any opposing organization. Again, we encourage you that if you are voting for mail, to vote it 2 to 3 weeks early. And there are sources of voting information are lwvmanatee.org as well as vote411.org. If you have any questions on this presentation or any other voting issues, please contact us at info@lwvmanatee.org. Thank you very much for your time and attention.